What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my Magicka Sorcerer build. So, as you know, Magicka Sorcerers are currently the highest DPS in the game, or the class. Since stamina characters got nerfed, in my opinion, I truly believe Magicka Sorcerers are the best, and then it's Magicka Dragon Knights, and then I don't even know what else. But those are the two best if you're looking for something to play. And we actually rolled this character a few days ago. It's fully geared, and I have everything ready for the build. So anyway, we're going to be covering all the gear, some replacements, and then we're going to go over like all the skills and champion points as usual in the build. So let's start off with the gear, because I think that's what most people are more interested in. So for the first thing we have is the monster set. Now we have two Alambris pieces. We have a heavy and then another heavy because it can't get medium, and unfortunately that's just RNG. So ideally you just want the set, but if you can get heavy and medium, that is what you want to go for. It doesn't really matter which one is medium, just one heavy, one medium. So we use Alambris because when you deal flame or shock damage, you have a chance to summon a meteor shower that does damage, and essentially it is AoE, and what we are using is a flame and shocks abilities, so or the two stats that we'll get into a little bit later. So next up on our list we have Necropotence, or the one that is kind of questionable, but apparently it does beat out Burning Spell Weave if you are doing your rotation properly. And this is only good for sorcerers because they have pets right now. But I truly believe this set, the Necropotence set, is going to be expensive when the Warden comes out. So if you're thinking about getting it, I'd probably get it now instead of like 2 months from now when they get even more expensive. So the reason why we use this is because it gives straight up Magicka, and when you have a pet active, your magic is increased by another 4,000. So the pet damage is scaled off Magicka instead of spell damage. So that's why we have this one. And ideally you want all of it in Divines because of your Mundus Stone. So if you want the best in slot stuff, you get Divines everything, and that's what you're going to be looking for. So if you are using Burning Spell Weave, that is also a good set, but I do believe Necropotence is slightly better. Min-maxing is in fact min-maxing, but if you don't care, then ideally just use whatever you want. So that's the reason why we use this one. I don't know how much it costs on console, but on PC, each piece is around like, well, each of the big pieces are like 50,000 to 70,000 gold, and the gloves are maybe like 30,000. Well, at least that's how much I bought it. And you have to upgrade it to gold as well. So after that, we have Moondancer. Now, this one is obtained in the Maw of Lorcaj trial. And once again, you could get the blue jewelry on normal and then purple and gold on veteran. So that's what you're going to be doing. Ideally, it doesn't really matter if you have blue to gold, but min-maxing, once again, you get slightly higher. But ideally, you just want the set. That's for the most part. And some of you guys may be wondering why we use Moondancer instead of Infallible Aether. And the reason for that is because Infallible gives critical, while Moondancer gives straight up spell damage and magic. So here's the thing. If you don't really understand what that means, magic increases your spell damage and it gives flat out spell damage. So your base damage is going to be higher, whereas if you get the Infallible, which is also a good set, you get critical. So if you hit your crits, then your damage will be slightly higher. But I believe having a flat damage, like for example, just to give you an example of how this works, if you hit 10,000 damage, ideally, Moondancer will just be like another like 2,000 or something. So your base damage will be 12,000, and if you're doing 10,000 with Infallible and you hit a crit, you'll be hitting like, I don't know, 15,000. But you could still be doing 10,000 minimum and 15,000 crits, where Moondancer, you start off at 12,000, and then if you get a crit, you'll do like something around there. But that was just an example. Base damage will be higher. You want spell damage for the enchantments, as always. And we're using 4 pieces of this one, because one, I see some people using 2 swords of Moondancer. That is extremely hard to get, especially in sharpened, and I don't have that. But I know a lot of people using 4 pieces as well. So we do have the lightning staff because one, if you do flame or shock damage, that also helps the Alambris proc, which is like it works together. So that's why we have the lightning staff. So this is our main bar, and then the second one is our like buff and more dot bar second, I guess. So we have sharpened over here. This is the 4-piece, 3 jewelry, 1 staff, and then your enchantment. You just increase your weapon damage and spell. That's usually the go-to one for most things. And on our back bar, we have the best in slot Maelstrom Inferno sharpened. I understand not everybody's going to be able to complete Maelstrom or just don't have the good RNG to get this. If you don't, you can always get another Moondancer staff if you can, and that one works as well. Ideally, sharpened is good, precise is okay, and any other trait is I probably would just use like a random staff that gives sharpened instead of any of the other traits. So sharpened ideally is the best, then precise comes in second best, but anything after that probably would not use. So once again, if you don't have Maelstrom, go for another Moondancer because it will give you the 4-piece effect on both bars if you don't have it. But if you can get a Maelstrom Inferno, that is currently best in the slot, so that's something to be aiming for. And if you can't get either of these two, you could use Infallible Aether instead of Moondancer entirely. That is also a very good choice, but once again, I chose this because it works for me. So Infallible also works, and then Maelstrom. If you don't have all of these, you could probably just use some random crafted set, or not crafted because you can't make jewelry, but just like any other set that has jewelry, and just get 2 staves or 2 swords or anything. But the big thing that's different from what I use is this set, the Necropotence, just because it gives flat out magic, and the Alambris, ideally 1 medium, 1 heavy, because it's good. So another thing is if you can't get this one because it is expensive or you just can't farm it, actually I think you can get this in either Bankurai or Rivenspire. It's one of those two. I'm pretty sure it's Bankurai. If you loot chests, you can pick this set up, or you can just buy it from other people. Either one works. And then if you want to look for Burning Spellweave, that is from City of Ash, and that one's pretty easy to farm as well. But yeah, those are the choices. If you don't have a Alambris, you can always go with Grothar. That one is Vaults of Madness, and that one's also a very solid set as well. So that has been the gear and some replacements. I think, honestly, the hardest thing you'll be getting is the Moondancer, just because it is coming from Maw of Lorcage, and technically you could pug it if you don't have any friends to do it with, but getting a pug group to complete Maw of Lorcage is not exactly the most fun or easy thing to do. So yeah, if you do have a group or like a guild that can run it, that's always good. And yeah, so let's go on to our attributes and everything else. So we just dumped all 64 points into magic because, once again, more magic equals more damage. And oh yeah, I should probably use food real quick. Alright, so we're staying within the good range of 17,000 health. Now, in all of my build videos, I will tell you that the minimum health you should have with food is 17,000. Anything above that is like a safe zone, and especially if you're doing like trials and or dungeons with other good players, you're gonna have other buffs up like Eben and Warhorn up constantly, so that would boost your health up to about 20,000, 22,000. So generally, if you're having full raid buffs, you'll be okay. So 17,000 minimum is fantastic. That's why we put all our points into here. If you don't feel safe or comfortable playing with like a low amount of health, like 17,000 very minimum, you could always put like 10 points into health, which will give you an extra 1,000 or so. Probably a little bit more if you do have all the passives. So like 5 to 10 points, I would say, is a safe zone. And yeah, it depends on how you play, honestly. So with that, we have the Thief Mundus Stone, and the reason why we have that is because you want your crits to do, or you want a higher crit chance, and more crit equals more damage, so that's generally a good thing. So with that said, let's get into our skills. Once again, bar 1, which is what we are on now, is our main bar, and second is off bar, or like back where we'll be casting all our dots. So let's start off with our main bar. We have the Summon Volatile Familiar, and this one is the first ability in the Daedric Summoning. It is one of the strongest abilities you're going to have, especially because we are using, obviously, the Necropotent set, which gives it more damage and more magic, which scales it to have a higher set of damage base. And yeah, you cast this pretty much every 8 seconds, and it'll just do more damage. So this is a very important skill to have, and your pet, it actually does a lot. So next we have Force Pulse. It is our main spammable ability in the Destruction Staff. Now, the reason why we use this one is because it does all 3 elements, and Force Pulse, I do believe it triggers Alambris because it does all 3 elements, so just hitting things with this would trigger your Alambris proc, and it is one of your more spammable attacks. So Force Pulse is the higher damage version of the other morph. So the difference between the 2 morphs is Crushing and Force. So this one, Force Pulse, we have it because it does more damage to Crushing, or I think it's called Crushing. What that one does is instead it'll have lower base damage, but it will interrupt enemies. So if you're doing like a trial and you're that guy who is in charge of interrupting or something, then the other one is good. Both of them, I think the damage difference is like a few hundred in terms of the tooltip, but I just use Force Pulse because we're trying to get the highest damage possible, and that's pretty good. So important things to get are all the passives here. You want pretty much everything. You restore magic when you kill an enemy, so having more magic is good, and then you get additional damage done and pretty much just more damage by having the passives. So next we have Mage's Wrath. It is under Storm Calling. This is your execute ability. So if you don't know what execute is, it's essentially when the enemy is below like 25% health, 25 or 30, you start spamming your execute ability, and then they take more damage if the enemy is at lower health. So in this case, it's below 20% health. It just does more damage, so that's what the execute term means. After that, we have Crystal Fragments. In my opinion, I truly believe this skill is broken and should be nerfed. And I'll tell you why. Because when you cast any ability that costs magic, you get a chance to have a free proc at this. So essentially, you just toss it and it does a huge amount of damage, and it costs less. So how would I nerf this, in my opinion? You get the free cast. So normally how this works is if you hard cast this ability, it takes like a second to charge up, and then you throw a bolt at an enemy. But if you proc it with the Crystal Fragments, it's a free throw and it costs less. So that's why everyone has it. And the way I would nerf this ability, because I truly believe it is very strong in PvP and PvE. So nerfing this one would make it on balance with pretty much every other class. And yeah, so how I would nerf it is pretty much just take out the reduced costs when you do proc it, and it'll still be a free cast, or not free, but it's still costful, but you just don't have the channel time to use it. And I would still make it do the same damage. Pretty much the second paragraph, I guess you can see, or you can just read it right now. I would take that entire thing away and just make it not cost less, but you get the free throw, essentially, no channel time. And then finally, our ability right here is Inner Light. That one is under the Mage's Guild. You just have to get your Mage's Guild to level 2 to get this one. It's very easy to do, and it just gives you max magicka and spell crit rating, so that's why we have this one. Now, we have Meteor on our main bar because we use this one for bosses, and it's pretty good because if you have ads around the boss, it does slightly less damage than the Destruction Ultimate, but it costs less, and if when we morph it, it's going to be Shooting Star 100%. I actually recently just grinded it up today just to get this ability, and yeah, so when we morph it, it's going to be Shooting Star, and the reason why you want this is because this passive right here, Magicka Controller, you get 2% or 1% for each level, so there's 2 levels in total. So a total of 4% for each slotted. So getting a max Magicka bonus while you are on this one is pretty good. And yeah, that's why you want this one. So having Meteor does less damage, but it's cheaper to cast, and that's why you're using it. And then Might of the Guild, this is another very important one. When you cast a Mage's Guild ability, which is Inner Light or Meteor, mostly you're going to be just using it for Meteor, it grants you Empower, which is like a bonus ability that increases the damage of your next direct damage attack by 20% for 5 seconds. So pretty much any other direct attack that does damage, it'll be empowered, doing more damage. So that's why we use this. Those are all my reasonings. You get more magic and recovery for having 2 of them. If you don't have Meteor, you can have the Destro ult on both bars, but I would highly recommend just farming for this. Unfortunately, for people not on PC, you're going to have to look up a guide or something for all the lore books. It's not fun either way. Even if you are on PC and have the add-on that just tells you where everything is, it's not fun farming it. So, sorry about that. It's just they had to put it at level 10 to get it. Nothing we can do about it. And then after that, we have a Dark Elf because our second bar is going to be a lot of fire. You get more magic and more stam. We don't really care too much about the stam. Well, I mean, it is kind of important, but mostly just magic. Increase your magic and flame damage or flame resistance. So this one's a very good one. And this one increases your flame damage by 7% and your other 2 elements by 2%. So we're using Force Pulse, which does all 3, which is like an increase of a lot by everything. So that's why we have Force Pulse as our main ability. And generally, the difference between Dark Elf and pretty much every other race is a few thousand. So min-maxing is min-maxing. If you are like a Breton for the extra magic, that is also fine too. But if you want more like maximum damage, I do believe Dunmer or Dark Elf is the best choice. So let's go on to our back bar. And this one is going to be pretty much all our dots. So we have Liquid Lightning on our first one. It's under Storm Calling. This is the morph version. We used Liquid Lightning because it is dot, and it does a very strong amount of damage to pretty much everything in the area. So that's why we have it. It's a dot ability. Our next thing we have is Haunting Curse. It used to be something different, but they changed the name. I never had a Magic Sorcerer back in the day before they changed it, but it's called Haunting Curse now. And what it does is you place a curse on an enemy, and then after 3.5 seconds, the curse will explode, and then they will do more damage, and like the enemy will take a damage. It's kind of like a bomb. And then after, the morph allows the bomb to go off, or the Haunting Curse to go off again, and then this time after another 8.5 seconds, it explodes again. So it's essentially one cast. It does this effect twice, and it is a total of a 12-second ability. So if you let it go off, so you want to cast this once and then wait 12 seconds and cast it again. Next we have our Blockade of Fire, which is Elemental Blockade. It looks different depending on what staff you have. So if you have a Flame Staff, it'll look like this. If you have a Lightning, it'll look different, but it is Elemental Blockade. The reason why we use this one is a very strong ability, especially if you do have a Maelstrom weapon. It does a lot more damage, and pretty much like enemies affected by your Wall of Elements take additional damage by light and heavy attacks. So if you're not bad at light weaving or heavy weaving, then I do believe this will be very good. So that's why we have this. Regardless of if you have a Maelstrom weapon or not, you should still use this because, I mean, you hit enemies and they take damage from it. So having a Maelstrom weapon just makes it better. If you don't have it, it's about like a 1 to 2,000 DPS loss, but ideally Magic Sorcs still outperform most classes even if you don't have it. So this is the current meta. And then once again, we have the Volatile Familiar. The reason why is because we have to have it on both bars. Otherwise, if you only have it on one and then you switch bars, they get like despawned. So you have to have it on 2 of them. There's nothing we can do about it. You have to have it on 2 of them. And then, yeah. And then our last slot, I personally use Rearming Trap. But this one is a changeable slot because there's a lot of other things you could use in replace of that if you wanted to. It also depends on what you're doing. So, in my opinion, Rearming Trap, if you're looking for maximum damage, this is the best way to go. But, like, if you are doing something that requires, like, no death or you, like, strong amounts of burst happens and you need to survive it, you could always put Conjured Ward. There's another one you could do Annulment or Harness Magicka. If you have the morph of this one, this is also a very good shield. I think the ward and this ability do it essentially the same thing, except the ward is a little bit more. This one is just like an overall ability that any class can use. But more shields, it'll give you Conjured Ward. You could also have Power Surge, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing like Maelstrom, for example, then Power Surge pretty much, like if you crit, then you just gain health back. So like solo content, that's also very good. So you can always change it out for pretty much anything. Or if you really want, you can put Dark Exchange. Essentially, it's like a health conversion where you restore health at exchange of magic. And the morph of that is a reduced cost of the stamina. And if you are a Stam Sorc, you can use magic for stamina and health. So that's pretty much how it works. But this last slot is a changeable one. So use whatever works for you. If you're going for maximum damage, I do believe Trap is the way to go. And of course, our ultimate on our back bar is the Destruction Staff, or the Destruction Ultimate Elemental Rage. Now, the reason why we use this is because it is really the strongest AoE ultimate in the game. And I do believe it is good for trash mobs and just pretty much like clearing anything but bosses. And you could use this on bosses if they are like standing still, like the first boss in Ethereum Archive, like that stone Natronach thingy. You could use this. It costs more than using Meteor by a like significant 40 something points, but it does a lot more damage. And the reason why we use Meteor on bosses is because you can get it back faster. So that's it. So that's our abilities, everything to like flex spots where you can just change them out. Ideally, for everything, you want to get all the passives. Just get all of them. They are passives. They help you. It doesn't really hurt you. And then you're going to be getting 5 in everything here because that's what you're going to be using. Light armor. And since you do want 1 heavy and 1 light, you're going to be getting... Ooh, I forgot. It's at 34. You get the passives for this one and up to the 3rd one, because after these are kind of useless because you're only having like 1 piece. So only these will be useful, and the same with the medium armor. And I do believe that's it. If you are doing like Sanctum Ophidia or something, you get like the first Siege Shield, and that one's for the final boss. But this build is pretty much ready for trials and dungeons. So let's go into our champion points now. Let's start off with the green one because it's like kind of easy to explain. So if you were watching this before Morrowind, then the way I have mine set up is reduces the magic cost of spells by 16%. Now, I do believe in the later patches, from what we heard, Warlord and Magician are going to be taken out. So if you're watching this video a year later from now, these may or may not be here. So with these 100 points, assuming they don't add any more, or they don't like completely change it or add anything new to the trees, we would take these 100 points. We would put everything into Arcanist, and then we'd still have like another, I don't know, 89 points left over. What we would do with that is either put it into Shadow Ward or Tumbling, or you could split them into both. Now, the reason why we use this one is because in certain situations, pretty much every situation, regardless of what you're doing, dungeons or trials, you're going to either have to roll out of something or block something at one time or another. So if they don't add anything, these are pretty much what I'm going to be putting into it. So like split it up into another like 45 or something like that. I'm not really sure. So this one is going to be maxed out for sure at 100%. And then half of these, split these up however you want it. It doesn't really matter. But that's how I feel like I'm going to be doing it in the future. So let's go into our blue tree next. We have 100 into Elemental Expert because it increases your flame, frost, and shock and magic damage by 25%. As you may imagine, we are using all of those with our Foolish Pulse. And you hit all of those elements and increases the damage of that by 25%. It's generally a good thing. So that's pretty much what you want to have. Now we have 24 into Elfborn because it increases the damage and healing dealt by spell crits. So if you crit, it does more damage, and this goes well with the overall flat damage. Now we have 1 point into Staff Expert because it increases the damage of your light and heavy attacks. So if you're learning how to light and heavy attack weave into your rotation, that will just increase the damage of it. After that, we have 75 points into Thaumaturge. Now, this increases the effectiveness of your damage over time abilities by over 20%. And why do we only have 75? Because we have the Exploiter passive. So, the way this works is it increases your damage against off-balance enemies. So, if someone is using a lightning staff and hits them with a wall of elements or something, enemies will be off-balance, and your job is to be doing more damage to them. So that's why this Exploiter passive is very good. And the 75%, it also, we don't just have 75 points into here for no reason, aside from that. We have a lot of dot abilities as well. So we'll go over that in a bit, even though you kind of know what it is. So that's why we have it in there. And then our red tree, we have pretty much a split between these two. This is the most important thing I always try to mention. No matter what build you're doing, you want to even this out. Now, I have 600 champion points because I'm capped out, but you may not be. So what do you do, for example, if you only have 50 champion points? You would put 25 into here, and then 25 into Elemental Defender, and then Hardy. So you want to even these out to a point where you get around 80 of each, and then anything after that is just kind of an extra bonus. But you want to even these out first, and then that's what you want. And then we also have thick-skinned. Now, I personally have 24 into here. I know some other friends lower it down to like 12 or something, but I just like to have the extra bonus of like not like being able to do something, so I have an extra second to roll out or something. And pretty much if you're standing in stupid, this prevents you from dying immediately. Well, not always, but it gives you that extra split second to do or have a reaction to it. And then we have 10 into Quick Recovery, increases the effectiveness of healing received. So, as you may imagine, our build is kind of on the lower side of health, which is 17,000, but is very acceptable. So, generally getting healed like higher is generally good. And then reduces the damage taken from light and heavy attacks by 1%. We just have 1 point into here because it does slightly help. And let's say you just get hit by a melee attack from a random enemy, it reduces that by 1%, and it actually does help, believe it or not. So once again, if you are getting anything out of this, is this build works for me, and if you found something that works for you, just stick with whatever you're using, to be honest. But that works for me. And once again, with the skills, the reason why we had the 75 into Thaumaturge is because Liquid Lightning is a dot, Haunted Curse is not, Blockade of Fire is a dot, and when you have the Pet Pulse, it does act as a dot ability. Obviously, a Fiery Rage is a dot because it has a huge circle. And then Mage's Wrath, I think that's single target, but Meteor is also a dot. So we have a lot of dots, which increases the damage. Now, before we wrap up this video, I want to show you the potions and food I use. So the food I use increases your max health and max magicka. The blue one, generally what you want is max health and max magicka. And it doesn't really have to be this exact one. I just happen to have this one at the time. So yeah, let's see, stack items. Okay, so this is the potion I use for more like dungeons and trials. Now we gain spell damage, then we have critical, and then we have the recovery. So you won't actually be using the critical rating because you have inner light on your main bar. So having this is kind of cool for your back bar, but you might, if you're doing like dungeon trials and stuff, you're gonna have buffs from pretty much every class. So the critical part is not really the important one. Having spell damage and magicka recovery is generally good, but if you are playing solo, I mean, this could help if you're on your back bar, but if you're doing trials, the crit part is not really, but it does help. And then if you're just doing like random stuff, we just have random potions, the welfare ones, where you can just find from around the world. And yeah, so before we go, I wanted to show you the rotation. This is actually my house. It looks very shiny and it looks nice during the day. You can actually watch that separately. There's a build video for, or not build video, like a house tour. But I'm just going to show you slowly how this build works. So assuming we have our pet up, we have about 46,000 magicka. I'm not going to do this really fast, but I'm just going to show you how it's supposed to work. And for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to use a regular potion, not the expensive one, because I'm just going to show you this slowly. But ideally, your rotation is going to be starting off with the potion, and then you're going to drop your meteor on the enemy. The reason why we drop the meteor is because it causes the empower, and then we switch to our second bar, and then we immediately place a haunting curse on him, and then after that you would like light attack and light weave into it, which also procs everything, and then you drop a liquid lightning down on here, which causes another dot, and then you light attack again, and then drop your blockade of fire. As you guys can see on the screen, these are dot and channel abilities, so you're going to do that really fast. After that, you cast your pet pulse, which is 4. And so you see the pet right here. He pulses and just does damage over time. So enemies sitting in there, they just take a lot of damage. This is why we use the Necropotent set, because it increases your max magicka. And after that one, you hit your trap. Assuming you placed it properly, it should look like that. It doesn't always work, and you don't always see the light, but generally if you place it within the area, you should be fine. And then you would swap to your next bar, light attack, and then force pulse. And this is the part where crystal fragments is kind of broken. It appears, and then you just toss it for free. So the way you guys know crystal fragments, if you hard cast it, it looks like this. You have to channel the thingy. It takes a second. You don't want to be doing that. You want to just cast the ability. If you do that, you get a chance, and you just free throw it, and it does so much damage. So that's the rotation in a nutshell. Generally, doing it faster, you start off with the potion, and then meteor, and you haunting curse, light attack, do the liquid lightning, light attack, and then blockade, and you pet pulse again, trap, force pulse until you get the crystal fragments proc, and then you toss it, and then repeat. So that's the rotation. Usually you kind of want to have an add-on that helps you track your buffs and stuff. So it tells you kind of like when to recast in a way. But overall, that has been the idea of the build. It is currently, in my opinion, the strongest build in the game until probably next patch when they do some sort of nerf. But who knows? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to drop a quick like on the video and let me know how I did. Also, before I head out, I wanted to make a quick mention that I did start up a new guild. Well, it's not started up, but like I wanted to restart it in a way where before Morrowind comes out, I wanted to get more people who are interested in doing dungeons and trials, or if you're just a subscriber, feel free to send a mail as well. But the idea of this is I wanted to start up more guild events for Dungeons and Trials. So that means when the next expansion hits, I just have people ready to do Dungeons and Trials, so we can all learn together in a way. So the way it works is there's an open core. That means pretty much everyone can participate. We have events for everyone, and then like later on you get put into a group, and then you could do more events, and then pretty much cores are where you go to play with a certain set of people. And when you play with those people, usually by playing with the same people and doing trials with them, you get better. So improvement, but then we will also have open events. So essentially, I just dropped a lot of people who are inactive, and I'm trying to start this up again. So if you are interested in joining, feel free to send me an in-game mail. You could find my @ right here. Just send me a mail. I try to read this on the daily, or whenever I'm on, I try to check it, and I'll try to get you in as soon as possible. But with that said, thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you guys later.